What is good? I am Jess.
I'm Clint.
And today with me I have Retish Daya. Did I say that right?
You said it right.
Okay. And Rachel Ho. And we are going to be going over the neuroscience of exercise. So I will let you two introduce yourselves. So Ritesh, you can go ahead and say a few words.
Sure. So thanks, Jess, for the introduction and for having us, and having me. So Rach and I, we kind of went to school together. That's how we know each other, and that's kind of how we decided to do this podcast. I did my PhD at McMaster in neuroscience. I studied the dopamine pathway, and the two illnesses that I focused on were schizophrenia and Parkinson's. So they're very different illnesses. They're by no means comparable, but biologically they have similar pathways that are not functioning in the right way. So we were looking at dopamine, and we were studying how to modulate the transmission of dopamine in the brain to act as a treatment. So I did that. So that was my PhD for 5 years. And then obviously I just, in my own time, I really enjoy exercise and staying healthy and feeling good and feeling energetic. So, there's a lot of correlation between, how you mentally and how your brain works and how you feel. And exercise is a big part of that.
Awesome.
And I'm Rachel, and I did my PhD at McMaster with Ritesh in a similar program, but not the same one, psychology. And I studied brain networks and how they communicate with one another. And the three networks that I focused on are neurocognitive networks that tend to go awry or have some sort of aberration in them following some neuropathological condition or during a neuropathological condition like concussion, which is what I focused on. And I got to do my master's as well in rehabilitation science, where I got to work with some kids and do some behavioral neurocognitive testing, which was really fun. And in my spare time, fitness is also quite important to me. I teach HIIT classes, spin classes, and yoga classes. And Ritesh and I have once been to the gym together, and it's a long journey to be there with him. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, that is amazing.
Yes,
we are nowhere
absolutely.
near as accomplished as you two. But thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll learn something new, and so will you guys.
Yeah, we're happy to be here, and your accomplishments on like the physical exercise side of things are mind-blowing, man. I've seen you like explode. Like just looking at you today, you guys can't tell on the camera, but Clint is looking thick. Thick.
You hardly fit in the camera. Scooch over.
Excited for the next contest, man.
Thank you, man.
All right, so we'll get right into it. So what chemicals are actually released during exercise, and what do they do for your brain and how you feel?
Can I go? Take it.
You can start.
Sure. So when your body's moving and when you're challenging yourself and kind of stressing your body out, your body is doing 100 million different things, and your brain is responsible for coordinating a lot of that. So you're releasing hormones, you're releasing neurotransmitters, and when you want to think about why you feel good sometimes after you finish exercising, some of the molecules that are released that are responsible for that are dopamine, epinephrine. I'm saying that right? Norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin. All of these neurotransmitters are involved in part of movement, just generally. They're also involved in modulating the hormones that are released. And then they're also just involved in part of your reward circuitry. And I think sometimes why you feel good is also your body's like telling you, hey, this is good for me. I think one of the best analogies for me and how I think about it is exercise is medicine for the brain. You think about different medicines for your body. It's like, how do I, really like treat my brain? And one of the best ways to treat your brain is exercise. So to your question, of some of those molecules that are released, they have responsibilities in helping you move and helping your body respond to challenge. They're also, the part of their job is also the consequences. You feel good. You want to add?
Yeah.
There's a lot there to talk about.
I know, you opened up a big
can of worms.
Yeah, big can of worms. So another one that exercise researchers like to talk about is BDNF. It stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's just a chemical that gets released. And what's important about it is that it's along this signaling pathway that increases neurogenesis, or the growth of neurons in your brain, and it's really good for places like the hippocampus, or there's a high level of receptors in places like the hippocampus, basal ganglia, and the cerebellum, and it's that's where we can talk about cognition at another point in time. But brain-derived neurotrophic factors, or BDNF, is known as, I've heard it called the manure from the brain, which is quite funny, but I think it's known as like fertilizer for the brain because it improves growth of neurons, especially in places that are good for cognition, like memory and stuff like that. So another one that is increased following and is improved overall, like a long-term effect of exercise.
Okay, that was actually a question if there's any like short-term effects and are there any long-term effects of the chemicals that are released.
I can go. So
Go ahead, yeah.
in the short term or the acute phase, maybe like 2 to 3 hours post exercise, or even during your exercise, you're already starting to get like what they call runner's high. Like
Yes,
that
yeah.
really big boost of good hormones, and that does stay increased just past your exercise as well, but then it decreases over time. Over a long period of time of exercising, your body adapts to having that dopamine and that serotonin and that BDNF, and so it might increase your sensitivity to it. Not to mention all your brain networks that are activated whenever you exercise. So you're conditioned mentally to be in that exercising mood, and so your body's expecting it afterwards. So the long-term benefits of having this routine exercise are really great because so many of your hormones and all these other little brain molecules that are really good for you and promote good healthy brain is upregulated over time.
That's amazing. So how long do you need to exercise in order for this to happen, or is it an intensity-based kind of thing? Duration or intensity?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I feel like I'm talking too much though.
Go ahead.
Talk away!
Talk away.
This is a big debate, I think, in the literature. McMaster does quite a bit of work on this, where they talk about, where there's a group of researchers at McMaster that look at HIIT training. So that's like that high intensity interval training for big burst of energy for a short period of time. And they also look at the difference between aerobic versus resistance training. And the literature is always divided. There are some people that say that longer might be better, and some people say that you can get the same amount of benefits after a 7-minute workout. Overall, I think if you're doing something, it's better than nothing.
Yes.
Walking versus running, sometimes running seems to be like a higher intensity thing and gives you more of those benefits. So it's hard to say as a catch-all how long is good, how short is too little. So it's a very difficult question to answer, but it seems like there is research saying that a high intensity exercise bout of 7 minutes can give you the benefits of what you would get over like a long endurance of, let's say, an hour. So the difference between aerobics and resistance training, I feel like a little bit all over the place, but seems to be physiological differences between the two. So we talked about BDNF, which seems to be released during aerobics exercising, and aerobics like running, jumping jacks. You could get an aerobic feel even out of something like yoga that's a little bit more active. So BDNF we find in the peripheral system of rats and even like runners and whatnot. So that means that our body is releasing it. But you don't see it as much in resistance training. But resistance training is still good for things like cognition and improvement of memory. And it seems like they're working on different pathways. The literature is quite vast, and it's hard to distill into like a little bit of this does
Like
one
a yes
thing.
or no.
Yeah.
So, but overall for health benefits, aerobics and resistance training are both good, and a little bit rather than nothing is always better.
So the message is do something and do both if you can.
Yeah, I think also some of the new research that we're seeing, and again, just full disclosure, I haven't been as close to the science in the last couple of years than I was. I haven't been practicing anything regarding my PhD training and that for the last few years. So a lot of the stuff that I've been looking into now is just out of my own pure interest. And one of the things that I've been seeing in the literature and just like listening through different formats of people who are through audiobooks and podcasts is the effect of challenge and stresses on the body. So we see that when you stress the body in a productive way like exercise, you have a lot of neuroprotective effects that kick in. And your body, when it goes under short durations of stress, like high intensity training, releases a bunch of neuroprotective factors that are good for your brain and good for the long-term health of your brain. So one of the things you can think about also is they've been looking into the effects of, for example, sitting in a sauna for, like, there's a protocol there where it's 5 to 10 minutes. If you look into it, you'll find it. But just for discussion's sake, sitting in a sauna for 10 minutes on a regular basis has shown, now they have clinical evidence, to decrease the likelihood of things like dementia by 60 to 70%. So I think the protocol was like, if you sit in a sauna, again, this study you'll have to fact check the protocol itself, but if you sit in a sauna for 4 to 5 times a week for it's not very long, like about 10 minutes, you have decreased your likelihood or your risk of dementia by 60%. And what that shows us, and you also see the same thing with high intensity exercise, is when you're stressing the body, your body's doing a lot of this, is releasing a lot of these neuroprotective factors that are helping you in the long term. So I think just even doing high intensity workouts, whether they're 10 to 50 minutes long, that little bout of stress on your body, even physically, like when you, for example, when you're building muscle, it's that stress and that that breakdown of the muscles that's actually good in the long term, because those muscles become stronger. And it's the same effect with high intensity workout and the effect it has on other parts of your body, like your brain. And then the long term effects of those are quite substantial.
I'm gonna sound maybe dumb it down a bit, but like when I like listening to you guys talk about the brain and its function, I think like for the most part, we almost tend to think of them separate, like our bodies and our brain, but really like they're one and the same, and they, for the most part, they function the same, right? Like, so
Yeah.
like when you're talking about breaking down muscle, like you break down muscle fibers for the sole purpose of them growing back stronger.
Correct.
So when we're talking about like, or when you guys are talking about, the stress factors and the BDF that's released, in fact, like you're stressing the muscle, the brain muscle, in order for it to grow back stronger, right? Like that adage of, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're not stressing the brain, if you're not challenging it in a positive way, then yeah, your likelihood of getting dementia or stuff like that is heightened,
Right.
Because you're not exercising the brain as it's meant to be used, right?
Yeah, I think this is maybe just a commentary on like life in general, but we're getting so conditioned into thinking we just need to be comfortable, we just need to feel comfort and safety, and I think that's very different from how we were evolutionarily designed. And I think it's also it has these negative effects where people feel comfortable just sitting and being comfortable doing nothing. You need to go out there and stress your body. You need to go out there and stress your mind. And again, there's good and bad things to this. You don't want to be consistently under stress. Like long-term chronic stress, like when you're stressed out at a job, that's unhealthy for you.
Yes.
But when you're stressing your body in healthy ways, like going to the gym, going to a sauna, or learning something that's challenging, that's difficult for you, those things are actually really healthy for your body.
On to the next one. All right.
I'll add a quick thing, funny, like a story that I heard, and it was they were talking about Warren Buffett, and again, we don't know exactly the truth to all of this, but for the most part, they say that he eats takeout, like McDonald's and Burger King, pretty often. He's an investor in McDonald's, so I believe he eats it quite often. Apparently he drinks a Diet Coke every day, and you look at him, he's like in his 80s, late 80s, and he's fairly active and mobile, and he looks fairly healthy for his age. And the comment there isn't to go eat McDonald's or to go drink Coke. I don't think anybody should be drinking Coke, just for disclosure. But apparently his, when they talk to people close to him, his levels of stress are incredibly low. And I think one of the things we don't give enough weight and concern to is chronic stress and the effects that has on your body. And that might even be more dangerous to your health than eating McDonald's or drinking a Coke every day. So that's another thing to think about is managing and coping with stress, and it's very hard to do. Like being in a stressful situation with work and life, you can't avoid those. Sometimes that's just what life gives you, but there are ways to manage and to cope with stress and to fight it. And it's mindfulness, yoga, exercise. all those things can help manage stress and anxiety. And I just like to think like if Warren Buffett is eating an unhealthy diet but is still healthy, like what are the like it gives you the magnitude of the effect of stress on the body and the brain.
And going back to one of your earlier points when you were saying like exercise like a medicine for the body, um, you talk about stress and there's also negative chemicals that are released, right? Like, and how it affects the body, how it affects your sleep, how it affects your digestion.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you look into it to see like how detrimental that can be in the long term of that chronic stress. So the positive chemicals that is the medicine to fight against those, to level out your cortisol levels and your magnesium levels,
right,
and all that stuff so that your body isn't basically toxic to itself.
Correct. Yeah, like say when you're stressed, one of the primary chemicals released is cortisol, and when you have cortisol consistently and chronically released, it has very negative effects. So yeah, that's absolutely right.
All right. So obviously, I want to talk about mental health. So how does exercise positively impact your brain and mental health? Or is that too broad of a?
I feel like you should start. This is your.
Well, I think like everybody knows what the answer is. It's a no-brainer. It has such a great effect on your mental health. Exercise is super important. We've said it many times, the benefits of it, and on mental health, it's absolutely important. I think we're at a stage where we're in a pandemic of anxiety, in just our everyday lives. We have our phones in front of us, and here I am holding my phone. It's a part of my being, right? And we're swiping, we're scrolling. You're on, you have this dopamine head in front of you, and you're in this constant, a state of searching for dopamine, or your constant stress of worrying and thinking about the next thing. You need to find ways to help you manage this need to have that dopamine hit, or this need to feel stressed and anxious. And if you're not feeling stressed and anxious, your body's so used to being in this state of high cortisol, this fight and flight response, that when you're not in it, you're feeling anxious. There must be something else that I need to be thinking about, because I can't just be at peace. And one of the best ways to deal with that and to manage your mental health is exercises. There's tons of research out there that just talks about the benefits of mental health. And I think, I think everybody goes through bouts of anxiety and depression. I think that's inevitable for everybody. And I do think, and what we've seen in the literature, that some people are more prone or have a higher risk to having clinical and severe depression and anxiety. And so for those people, they've been given a little bit of a harder stone to step over than other people. But we all have this small stone that we have to step over. Those who've been just genetically are more prone to it, have a bigger stone to step over, so to speak. So we all need to just get over that stone. For some people, it's a bigger stone than others. And you just need as many tools as you can to help you step over that stone. And exercise is probably one of the best tools. And exercise and mindfulness, are scientifically proven. They're accessible to everybody. They're like the tools that everybody basically has to help cope and to manage their mental health. Should I add?
Yeah, I have stuff to add.
Yeah.
I don't want to, 100% agree with you. And on a chemical level, we were talking about anxiety and stress. Exercise releases endogenous or naturally producing endocannabinoids, or activates our endocannabinoid system, and some of the exogenous, or the ones that are not created in the body that we typically know about, are CBD and THC. So when we exercise, we're creating them internally. So we don't have to have that external. It creates a very similar effect to what you might expect CBD and THC to produce on the body, and it reduces stress levels, anxiety, helps with sleep and whatnot. And so that's another benefit of exercise that's not one that we already mentioned, and it does reduce anxiety and stress in a really natural way, and your body responds to it by producing more receptors, so that you when you do produce those endocannabinoids, your body's able to actually process them. Yeah, and so on a mental health level, reduction in stress and anxiety is really awesome. Also a great way to reduce depression, and the studies are showing that really exercise and movement is really good for mental health benefits, not only because of the movement, but because you're often connecting with other people, which is a more social level of exercise. And I feel like you have more to say about like actual neuropathological conditions than I do.
Yeah, you can go into like kind of the depths of different illnesses and how what neurochemically causes them, or what your genetic disposition is for all of them. And the bottom line is that exercise has a positive effect across the board. There's never going to be there's no mental illness or mental condition or even a state where you shouldn't go do some sort of exercise or move. I feel especially after COVID, people have become very conditioned to saying, I'm comfortable just staying at home, not going out and not doing much. The not doing much is an issue. You need to exercise. So whether it's exercising in your living room, great. If you can exercise outside and get fresh air and some vitamin D, even better. If you can exercise and you can now also have like a social component to it, even better. We're social creatures. Being with other people, there's something natural about it. When you're with people, you naturally release hormones. Like being around people changes your hormonal state, and that's what does that say? That sitting in isolation isn't totally good for you. I think with mental health especially, there's so many components to it that why I think we have a rise in mental health problems. One, I think we have better definitions for them. We have better ability to diagnose and say someone has a mental health problem. But I think truly it's our lifestyles have changed quite considerably over the last couple of decades that has resulted us being more prone to mental health issues. I think things like routines are super important. Sleep is super important. Exercising is super important. We don't, especially in North American culture, we don't walk as much as some other cultures do, especially cultures that have better weather conditions. People are more prone to walking. Here we have very little ability to just, have exercise built into our lives. You have to go out and do it, which is a challenge for our community. But we also have so many tools and fitness centers and so much information. You can find a YouTube video that can give you a workout in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
For free. So while we have maybe challenges, we also have so many solutions for it. So I think having a routine is super important. Waking up at the same time and going to bed at the same time is super important. When you're not sleeping well, when your routine's disrupted, you have a higher likelihood of having a mental health issue. We know that. So I think having a routine and exercising at the same part of the day is also important, not because there's benefits to exercising at the same time of the day or in the morning or the evening. The benefit is that it's built into your routine that you have now made it easier for you to exercise. Because saying if you exercise just anytime whenever you can, there's a bigger like we all come back from work and you said, okay, I've had a long day, I'm gonna sit on the couch now I gotta go to the gym. Like that's a tough one. But if you're used to saying, yeah, I'm finishing work, I gotta go to the gym before I get home, and that's just in your routine, there's no effort barrier that you need to break. It's just there. So having a routine just sets you up for success in so many ways. So exercising regularly, building it into your routine, going to bed and sleeping at the same time is so critical. Because some people say, oh, I struggle to go to bed, and it's like, okay, what time do you go to bed? Well, it depends. Sometimes it's 10 o'clock, sometimes it's 3 in the morning. And it's like, well, your body doesn't know when it needs to start shutting down.
Exactly.
And there's a thing called like sleep hygiene. And Rachel and I were just talking about Matthew Walker. He's been very prolific and verbal in expressing kind of some of the science behind this. And sleep hygiene is essentially, what are your sleep routines? Are you looking at your phone right before you go to bed? Are you doing a bunch of activity and then going to your bed and saying, I should just fall asleep like that? Your body doesn't know it's time to shut down.
Yeah.
You have to give it these cues, which start drawing down the lights, start doing less. Maybe don't eat right before you go to bed. Don't work out right before you go to bed. Don't have some blue light in your face before you go to bed. This is sleep hygiene. It's like setting up your hour before you go to bed so that your body knows, okay, it's time for me to shut off. And also it improves the quality of sleep, because it's not just enough to just pass out. It's what is that quality of sleep looking like? And all these things not only affect your mental health, it affects your ability to exercise well. If you didn't sleep while you go exercise, you'd have a terrible workout.
Yes.
Right? You guys can probably talk to this, you probably know.
Yes.
So when you talk about the benefits of exercise, there's all these other things that are involved in making sure that you're exercising well, but also these things help with mental health at the same time.
So there's no way that you can argue that mental health and physical activity are not directly related. It's
Oh,
it's genetically embedded in us that we need both. You need to be physically active um, in order for you to be mentally good.
Yeah, I think it's important to address like the way science studies exercise and mental health is tricky in humans, because usually when we try to do these studies, we blind participants, in the sense, not blind them physically, but they don't know which, like if you were to give them a pill, you try to make them two pills that are identical, they don't know if they got a control or an experimental pill. For exercise, they know they're getting the exercise, or they know they're not getting the exercise, and in general, people tend to know what the benefits of exercise are, and that might produce a more desirable effect, because they're expecting there to be a benefit of exercise. So it is a little bit tricky for us to study, but in general, adding animal studies plus human studies together, it shows that it's generally very positive for mental health. Although it's also really important to address that there are some detriments to over-exercise and extreme exercise in conditions that might produce a worse effect on the body or the mind. So dementia patients, there is a study or two that says that high levels of exercise can be not beneficial to certain patients, and that's because of oxidative stress, and their brain is already in a fragile state, although not having exercise could be worse. So there's almost like this medium ground that we need to look for, and that's why research in these areas are really important, especially for patient populations.
I think this is my personal belief, so this is maybe away from the science, but I think a lot of the mental health issues that the general population are facing are simply just lifestyle choices. And there are some people who have predispositions, who have genetic susceptibility to certain conditions, who unfortunately are going to have to face a harder battle. I think the lifestyle changes can help them considerably. But just generally speaking, for most people out there, your lifestyle and your decisions you make, and what you're doing from a day-to-day basis will have significant implications in your mental health, whether that's today or in a couple months, or your long-term health, whether that's your increased risk for certain brain issues like dementia and Alzheimer's when you get older, right? So you feel great today, and I don't exercise that often, but I eat really healthy, and I sleep well. Sure, you may feel great today, but you also want to start thinking about how are you prepping your body for itself in 10 to 15 years as you begin to age, right? Because we're all going to begin to age, and we're all going to respond to aging differently. But having good lifestyle and exercise habits will set you up for better success with regard to aging as you continue to grow.
One of the best, I can't remember where I heard it, but somebody was talking, I think it was on Instagram, and it was the first time I've kind of heard it put like this, but basically the gist of what they were saying is you need to look at your body and your well-being as your bank account. So the more you invest today, when you're older, when you retire, or when you do hit dementia, hopefully you don't, or you have heart condition, whatever it may be, the things you do today will help you. It might not be as rough of a situation like when you get to that stage, right? Like we know our body, it naturally almost it decomposes. You get older, you get shorter, you lose muscle mass. So if you can do something today that's going to help you put on more, then in the future you're going to have more to work with. You'll have more to retain. So even, like you said, like even if you are eating relatively healthy and whatever you have a steady job, are you under chronic stress? Are you exercising? Are you doing the right things that when you're 80 you're going to look back and be like, hey, you know what? Thank you for going on that bicycle ride.
Right, yeah. And like you said, you're investing in yourself, and it's compounding interest, right? It's these effects over time compound. That 10 minutes of exercise every day may not be a lot in a couple of years, but in 10 years that effect has compounded, and you will really see the benefits of it.
one of my favorite sayings. It's better to do a lot a little than a little a lot.
Yeah, and also like just with like muscle mass, like we're seeing now in the research, and you guys, you know, all know this role in like the exercise community, that muscle mass has a significant effect on the way your body ages. Increasing your muscle mass and muscle density from now has a significant effect on how you are when you're older. You don't want to be the person who's 80 years old and you have to sit on a couch because you can't get up and do stuff. Like, I want to be an 80-year-old person that's actually being able to move and still have quality of life, right? Because that's the other thing. Is like we can all live to 90, but you know what's one 90-year-old's quality of life compared to another, right? And I think muscle mass has been shown, and we see anecdotally helps you age properly. Yeah, like squatting and lifting, significant amounts of weight relative to your size and your body health, generally speaking, has massive effects on the bone density. And if you can strengthen your, contribute to strengthening that bone density now, you'll have massive, positive benefits in the future.
It's funny to listen to Retish talk about this stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally exercised at like 11 p.m. last night, and then looked at my phone afterwards.
Yeah.
And watched Schitt's Creek before bed.
Okay, well, it's Schitt's Creek, so that's fine. That doesn't count. Yeah.
And it's like, there's this ideal sleep hygiene that you want to have, but we never have it. Like for myself, I have a bad habit of using my phone before I go to bed. But what I try to do is I have like these filters on my phone that take out all the blue light. I wear glasses that have blue light filters, and like I put it on the lowest thing, and I try to like minimize how much I'm using. So you don't have to be perfect about it, right? There's don't feel that if you can't do it, you shouldn't do it at all. Just try and make small attempts to get as close as you can to it. No one's going to be perfect about it. Because I think if you're trying to be perfect about exercising at the same time every day for 45 minutes, going to bed at the same time, and you don't do it for a couple of days, you're going to get frustrated. Say, oh, I can't get it perfect. You just want to try and get as close as you can to it, right? You want to keep striving to be as close to that ideal protocol as you can be. But if you're not getting there, that's like 90% of us. You're not going to be perfect with that protocol, but you want to try and continue to get as close as you can.
All right, so now we get to talk about the cognitive abilities. So how are they improved? How does exercise improve your cognitive abilities?
Well, in general, it seems like it does. Whether you're resistance training or aerobics training, it does improve cognitive effects, especially for things like working memory. And so working memory is sort of how you manipulate information in your mind. So if I got Clint to memorize blue, green, 1, 2, and 5, your brain is going to work on keeping that in your memory, and that's what's your working memory space. So exercise seems to improve working memory, and even for patient populations like dementia, like Parkinson's, I'm missing one, PTSD is one that's being recently studied at McMaster, and exercise improves all of them. I can't really quite speak to whether or not resistance training or aerobics has a difference. There seems to be a difference. And I just don't know the literature too well on that. But McMaster does a whole line of research about sweating so you don't forget. And their catchphrase is sweat so you don't forget. And it seems like little bouts of exercise, like what you were saying earlier, Clint, about doing a little bit a lot, little bouts of exercise improves student retention of information. So if you were to go to a classroom of 8-year-olds, could be older. I'm picking 8-year-olds for no reason. They're hard to control, but if you got them to do like a little 10-minute break of jumping jacks, give them a chance to move their bodies, they seem to remember the information they learned shortly before for a longer period of time as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and same with university students. I guess I should have gone to university students first, because that's exactly what the literature did.
8-year-olds.
Well, they're kind of the same in some aspects.
Yeah.
So because the literature is going that direction, some schools that are a little bit better funded have put bikes in these students or these classrooms of grade 3s and stuff like that, so that they can put students on bikes when they feel instead of giving them a timeout, they put them on the bike. It's kind of cool, right?
What? Yeah, that's amazing.
I know, not a bad punishment.
to the kid, it's like probably a punishment, right? But it has this good effects, right?
Yeah.
Tires them out a little bit. Kids have lots of energy naturally, right? Probably go off topic, but just to that point, I feel like there's this pandemic with ADHD now. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like, oh my god, I have ADHD, I need medication. Oh, my kid has ADHD, I need medication. What we're also seeing in the literature is that a lot of what we're seeing with this manifestation of ADHD is simply diets and movement. Like, are children and adults moving enough? Are they, moderating their sugar intake? All these things, have this short-term uh, diagnosis, or if you will, of ADHD. Like, oh, my kid ate a bunch of sugar, can't sit still and watch or read a book. What do you expect?
Yeah.
I remember there's this chef by the name of Jamie Oliver, and he, about a decade ago, he wanted to try and change the foods that were given to kids in schools. So in their like canteens, delis, change what the food kids were eating, and to see the effects it had on them. And there was a study that was done just parallel to it. It wasn't a quantitative study; it was a qualitative study. They were just looking to see if they could draw any correlation, and they saw all these kids who were potentially, at risk for ADHD, that went away because they were no longer eating high glucose, saturated, really processed food.
Yeah.
They were eating stuff that had better, scores on the glycemic index, and they were doing much better. And it was like, oh, no brainer. And I think we're also very quick now to diagnose with medication and to prescribe medication, and that medication has a really significant and negative effect on your body and in the long term. So the medication you give for ADHD is basically an amphetamine, and it's supposed to help you like focus, but that drug is having an effect on the pathways in your brain. And when you're a child and those pathways are still developing, they're fragile. You're giving them these very severe medications that have effects on the way that those pathways develop. And then even as adults, I'm hearing it very commonly, like, oh, I have ADHD, I need to take Ritalin, I need to take some sort of medication for it, and it still has, they still have really strong effects on your brain, and that shouldn't be the quickest solution or response for you to say, I need to get prescribed with the medication. We need to look at exercising and our diets to say, hey, I need to be changing the way that I'm doing something here so that I'm not having this effect. And it's the same thing, I think, with sorry, I forget what I was going to say now. That was my little adjunct on what Rachel was saying about just like cognitive effects. But yeah, I think that was it. I forget what else I was going to say.
It's okay. You didn't sweat enough today.
Yeah, I didn't sweat enough today. It's true. I think there's just so much information out there that people get overwhelmed. We need to not complicate it. Mm-hmm. We know there's no scientific study right now that's going to say that exercise does not have positive effects for you. That we know. So don't overcomplicate it, go exercise. Because people are like, oh, how long I should exercise for? How much intensity should I have? And they talk themselves out of it before they even get to start doing anything. Mm-hmm. Like obviously, again, most things in moderation. You don't want to be training for like 8 hours a day and overtrain, and now you have all these negative effects. In moderation, I think exercise, mindfulness, and sleeping well are no-brainers. Mm-hmm. Don't overcomplicate it. Just do it.
I like that. Total sidebar. One of the most annoying things that I see on the internet now is optimal. It's like, right. Is this exercise optimal? Is this sleep optimal? It's like, you know what? You're not there yet. You're not an Olympic athlete. You're not in the NFL. Like, right. You don't need to be optimal. Just do it.
Right.
If you exercise well, exercise safely. If you're gonna work on your sleep habits, just start. Start getting better sleep.
Exactly.
Like, who cares if you have the optimal diet?
Right.
You're not there yet.
Right.
So just do something.
Right. So I also think when you get to that level of, finding the optimal of something, that also science changes on that stuff. Yes. Like, what's the optimal diet? Optimal diet has changed over the last decade. Every decade there's a new optimal diet, right? But we know there's certain things that you should be doing and not be doing that are not up for discussion. Yeah. Processed foods, lots of sugar. We know that that's not good for you. Whether you're a vegan or a carnivore and like all those types of diets, now we're getting into like the nitty-gritty of it. But we know at the very least, just eat healthy, and everybody knows what healthy is.
Yes.
You know what's not healthy at the very least, right? Yeah. Don't do that. And then everybody's body's different, so that's the other thing. It's like what works for somebody else might not work for you. So that's when you want to kind of do a little bit of research of, this is what my body feels like. This is what I need to like try something out. It doesn't work, okay? Try something else. But just don't super overcomplicate it that it prevents you from doing something. Because I feel people like, okay, now what diet do I need? They see all these diets like, oh, I can't figure this out. I'm just going to continue eating McDonald's. It's like, McDonald's isn't right, so let's make that change, right? Let's start there.
So that is all of my questions. But is there any interesting facts, tidbit, anything that you would like to sprinkle in?
I've heard a debate between rest and exercise. Like, do I sacrifice sleep and get up in the morning to exercise?
Okay, yeah, that's a great one, yeah.
I mean, the jury's still out, I think. I heard that, as a rule of thumb, if you need to wake up and exercise and then nap later, you probably sacrifice the sleep for the exercise. But I don't really have an answer, but I thought that was a really cool thing that's out in the literature right now. And there's no real answer to it. Sleep is, of course, important. Sleep for cognition as well, not only for your body's repair, but for your brain. Ritesh was talking a little bit about Matthew Walker, and there's this whole line of literature about how the hippocampus and the amygdala are so closely tied. So when you are experiencing something in your waking life and it has an emotional effect on you, so let's just say, let's think something really happy. Let's go with really good news. Your friend is having a birthday party. You're having a great emotional experience with it. That memory is tied to that emotion. Same for if you're really angry. That memory of being angry is tied to the feeling of feeling anger. They're so closely tied. And in the brain, there's high traffic between the two. So they're passing information quite often. Sleep dissociates them. So the connectivity between the hippocampus, memory center, amygdala, emotion center, diminishes as you go through your sleep cycles. And that's really good for you because then you'll retain the memory without the emotional affect. So if you were really angry or if you're really happy, both of those emotions get dissociated from the memory, and that's a good thing. It's really healthy. So you do need the sleep and rest, not only for your body, but for your brain. And the tagline goes, you sleep to remember and you sleep to forget. Really important for you to have both.
I like that. I think also now, when we're thinking about like our brain and, exercise and, all the information that's out there, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. Because now we have this great thing where all this information is super accessible. Now it's also super overwhelming at the same time. So I'll just share that for me, what works really well for me is I don't have the time to look at research studies, and most people don't have the ability to comb through a research study. Like we went to school for 5 years just so that we can read a research study properly. But I don't think that's the most effective way for most people to try and get information anyways. I think you need to find a couple good resources. So, for me, I find a couple people that I hear about, I'll read about them, I'll learn a little bit about them, and if I think that they're in the right direction, I'll begin to just defer to them for information. So somebody who's really good for the neuroscience of the brain, and it's how exercise in the brain affects everything for us, is the Huberman podcast.
Yes.
And he's a professor at Stanford, and he has a podcast, and he makes the information super digestible.
Yes.
So that's a good resource for a lot of people to start with. He'll talk about how to improve your focus and attention, how to improve your brain through exercise, and it's just very easy to digest. So that's a good resource for people. He has a podcast. Then there's Matthew Walker, who we've spoken about a few times. He's been very prolific recently, and he's a great resource for how should I improve my sleep and how important is sleep. Because there was the idea that if I don't sleep during the week, I can catch up to sleep on the weekend. And he right away comes out and debunks that from the beginning, says that research does not support that. You can't catch up on sleep, so you just need to get your sleep every night. He's a great resource. He has a book, so you can read his book, and he's on a bunch of different podcasts where he's sharing the same information. So he's another person you should look out for. And then just find your a podcast that interviews different professionals and experts, and it's just a great way to kind of just continue to remind yourself of this information. Because you can remember, I read the book and that I should do this when I sleep, and you'll forget about something, and then you'll stop thinking about it. If you're continually kind of just having people and experts talk about their experiences and the research and their findings. It just reminds you. It's a subtle way just to keep up to date, and it's entertaining at the same time. Yeah, I think don't get overwhelmed with trying to go and navigate through all the research to try and figure it out. Find a few people who you trust and use them as a resource. I think that's just your the best step to go forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like this podcast, you can follow
Mhm.
Jason, right?
Click like and subscribe. Well, I want to say from both of us, thank you guys so much. Plethora, wealth of knowledge between the two of you guys.
Very overwhelming.
We could keep this going for hours.
Rachel knows a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, super interesting stuff. Thank you. It was amazing to have both of you on
Thanks for
today.
having us.
This was really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
enjoyed
this
it.
has been absolutely amazing. So you already know that your sleep is important and exercise is important, but after this, if you don't follow these rules or guidelines,
We can't help you
Yeah.
beyond that. Yeah.
no hope. No
Yeah.
hope. So thank you very much for tuning in. That is it. That is all.
Thanks.
Peace.